Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
There is something about the first car you buy entirely on your own, the blood, the sweat, the gut punches it took to get there, that makes it more than just steel and tires. It becomes a piece of you, a reward for all the nights you said no to yourself, all the mornings you dragged your tired bones out of bed while everybody else slept in. For me, that car was a brand new, cherry red SUV, sitting in my driveway like a damn trophy. I had spent 3 years grinding away at a job that barely knew my name just to save enough for the down payment. I had skipped vacations, missed out on weekend trips, turned down new clothes and takeout meals because I had my eyes locked on that prize. And the day I signed the papers, my hands shaking just a little, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I had finally won something for myself. I kept it spotless, too, like a shrine. No eating inside. No muddy shoes. No reckless turns down back roads just for the hell of it. It wasn't just a car, it was respect. It was freedom. It was every goddamn apology from life that I thought I would never get. Then Tyler, my younger brother by 3 years, the permanent fun one, the family screw-up who never had to live with the consequences of anything, decided that what was mine could be his for the afternoon. He didn't ask. He didn't even leave a note. He just snatched the spare key I kept hidden in the junk drawer, peeled out of the driveway like he was a movie star, and disappeared into the city traffic. I didn't even know it had happened until I got off work early and pulled up to find my driveway empty. At first, I thought maybe I parked it on the street and forgot, but no, I knew damn well where I left my car. For a few wild seconds, I even wondered if it had been stolen, like really stolen, by some stranger. My heart dropped straight through the floor. I scrambled inside, calling the police before I could even think straight, only to get a text halfway through the call. Car's fine. Just needed it for a bit. Love you. No apology. No permission. Just Tyler, acting like I was the crazy one for even caring. I dropped the phone. My hands were trembling, partly from fear, mostly from rage. I paced the living room for what felt like hours, waiting for the rumble of my car coming home, and when it finally did, it didn't sound right. It didn't sound right at all. I ran outside, still half believing I could rewind the day if I just moved fast enough, and there it was, my SUV, the rear end smashed like a crushed soda can, the bumper hanging by one sad little thread of plastic. Tyler stumbled out, grinning like an idiot, a fresh scratch running down the side of his jaw. Damn pole came out of nowhere, he said, laughing, like he was sharing a funny story at a bar. I stood there, staring at the wreckage, feeling something deep inside me tear in two. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him until something, anything, clicked in that empty head of his. Before I could find the words, Mom and Dad came outside too, their faces set in that familiar, infuriating blend of fake concern and blind defense. It's just a car, sweetie, Mom said, voice syrupy with that condescension she always saved for me. Tyler didn't mean any harm. Yeah, come on, Dad added, waving a hand like he was brushing dust off his shoulder. You'll forgive him. We already talked about it. And Tyler, that little bastard, leaned against the broken frame of my SUV, crossing his arms and giving me this lazy smirk, like he was daring me to make a big deal out of it. You'll forgive me, right? Mom and Dad said so. I should have exploded. I should have unleashed every bitter word I had been swallowing for the past 20 years. Every resentment they told me was just in my head. But I didn't. I didn't say a single word. I just looked at all three of them, my mouth shut so tight it hurt, and something inside me, something vital and bright, just snapped. In that moment, staring at my broken car, my broken family, I realized exactly how much of a fool they thought I was. They thought I would grit my teeth, laugh it off, pull out my wallet like always, fix their mistakes like always, be the good daughter, the good sister, the responsible one they could shit on whenever it suited them. But not this time. I turned around without a word, walked back inside, and shut the door. I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands still trembling, and I started making a list. Not a list of repairs. Not a list of things to fix. A list of things I was done doing. A list of things I was about to stop cold. Outside, I heard them laughing. I heard Tyler say something about how she'll get over it. She always does, and I felt the heat rise up my spine like a slow, boiling river. That was the last laugh they were ever going to get out of me. The storm wasn't coming. The storm was already here. People always talk about how family should come first, how blood is thicker than water, how you are supposed to stand by each other no matter what, but nobody ever talks about how heavy it gets when you are the only one carrying the weight for everyone else. And nobody ever tells you what to do when that weight starts breaking your back. It was not just my car they wrecked that day, not just my pride or my trust they ran over like roadkill. It was every quiet sacrifice I had made for them over the years, every stupid decision to put their needs before my own, every late night crying over bank statements and second-guessing if I was doing the right thing. 2 years before Tyler wrapped my dreams around a telephone pole, my parents had fallen on hard times, or at least that was what they said when they showed up on my doorstep one cold November night, faces drawn tight with worry, shivering in jackets too thin for the weather. Dad's hours had been cut at the warehouse, Mom's health had taken a turn, and the bank was sending letters about overdue mortgage payments faster than they could tear them open. They made it sound desperate, made it sound like they were one bad week away from living out of their car, and even though some tiny voice in the back of my mind whispered caution, I ignored it, because what else could I do? I stepped up. I offered to help with the mortgage until they got back on their feet, thinking it would be a few months at most, maybe a year if things stayed rough. It was not a small commitment either. Every single Friday, I had an automatic payment set up to pull $2,000 a week from my account to cover their mortgage. $2,000 a week sounds crazy when you say it out loud, and maybe it was, but when you are drowning in guilt and obligation, math tends to take a backseat to loyalty. For 2 years, while they bought new furniture, took weekend trips, and bragged about weathering the storm, I kept grinding away, cutting corners, skipping vacations, driving a beat-up used car that wheezed when it hit 40 miles an hour. I convinced myself it was temporary, convinced myself that family meant sometimes you gave more than you got, convinced myself that one day they would turn around and thank me properly. That fantasy shattered the second Tyler slid across my driveway with that dumb smirk on his face, the twisted wreck of my brand new car in the background, and not one of them even flinched at what they had done to me. They saw all my sacrifices as nothing more than an invisible obligation, a duty I owed them for simply being born into the same bloodline. That was the moment I understood something bitter and important. They were never going to treat me right because they never had to. So I sat at my kitchen table that night, staring at the wreckage of my good intentions, and I pulled up the banking app on my phone. I stared at that automatic payment, that $2,000 noose wrapped around my neck, and I pressed cancel without a second thought. No announcement. No angry phone call. No warning shot across the bow. Just silence. Just freedom. At first, nothing happened. Weeks rolled by, and life went on almost normally, except I had an extra bounce in my step, a quiet little flame burning low and steady in my chest. They kept calling for family dinners, kept texting photos of Tyler at barbecues or Dad showing off the new flat-screen television they definitely should not have been able to afford. I smiled politely, made excuses, and kept my distance, letting the news slip quietly off my neck and land, ever so gently, around theirs. Mortgage companies are funny that way. They are patient until they are not. 3 missed payments is usually all it takes before the letters turn nastier, before the phone calls start coming at all hours of the day, before the warnings turn into threats. Around the end of the 3rd month, I heard from a neighbor that a big ugly foreclosure notice had been taped to my parents' front door, flapping in the spring wind like a white flag of surrender. Still, they did not call me right away. Maybe they were too proud, or maybe they still believed, deep down, that I would come riding in to save them like I always had before. It didn't matter. I was done. I was so far past done that even the idea of feeling guilty barely scratched the surface anymore. Every text they sent got a one-word answer. Every voicemail went unanswered. Every casual family gathering invite deleted without a second glance. Some nights I would sit on my porch with a glass of cheap wine, staring up at the stars, wondering when they would finally figure it out, when the realization would hit them like a freight train that I was not their backup plan anymore. I imagined them sitting around their kitchen table, just like I had once sat around mine, looking at bills they could not pay, making lists they could not finish, feeling that same cold, sinking dread in the pit of their stomachs. And God help me, it felt good. I knew the clock was ticking, and all I had to do was sit back and wait. By the time 3 months had crawled by like a wounded animal, the cracks in the foundation of their perfect little world were wide enough for anyone with 2 eyes and half a brain to see. The foreclosure notices had started arriving thick and fast, slapped across the door with bright colors that screamed failure louder than any words ever could. Some days the mailman barely even bothered pushing them into the mailbox, just left them rubber-banded to the front porch railing, like a silent, humiliating bouquet. It was almost poetic in a cruel sort of way, watching the fortress they had built on my back slowly, painfully crumble without my help holding up the walls anymore. I would hear about it in little pieces at first, mostly through town gossip and the occasional angry voicemail Mom would leave when she thought I was too busy to pick up. It always started polite, like she still believed in the version of me that would swoop in and fix everything, but it would twist halfway through, morphing into something bitter and ugly the second she realized I was not playing the same tired role anymore. "We're struggling, honey, and we know you're doing well," she would say, voice trembling just enough to sound pitiful, before shifting into that sharp, needling tone I knew too well. "You owe us for everything we've done for you." I never answered those calls. I would sit there sometimes, phone buzzing against the kitchen counter, watching the caller ID flash with their names like ghosts banging at the door, and feel absolutely nothing. Tyler, meanwhile, was living like he had won the damn lottery, showing off new sneakers and restaurant meals on social media, tagging himself at concerts and sports bars like he had no clue, or just no interest, in the storm brewing at home. He posted a photo one afternoon of himself lounging by the community pool with some beer can in hand, captioned "Living the Dream," and I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. Part of me wondered if he even knew how bad things had gotten, or if he just assumed somebody, probably me, would come sweeping in with a check and a smile at the last possible second, like a tired magician pulling one more rabbit out of an empty hat. Maybe it was easier for him to stay stupid, to live in that padded little bubble where consequences were always somebody else's problem. Either way, it didn't matter anymore, not to me. While their world cracked and tilted and started to sink into the mud, I was busy putting my own life back together, piece by glorious piece. I started dating again, real dates with real grown men who asked real questions about my life instead of just assuming I would bend myself into whatever shape made them comfortable. I bought myself a second-hand car, nothing fancy, but reliable and mine, and I drove it with the windows down, feeling like I could finally breathe after years of keeping my life locked up tight. I laughed more. I slept better. I remembered who I was before I let their problems weigh me down so damn much. Still, there were moments when the old guilt would creep up on me like a slow-moving shadow, whispering that maybe I was being too harsh, maybe I was cutting too deep. They were family after all, and family was supposed to stick together. But then I would remember standing in my driveway, staring at the twisted wreck of my dream car, Tyler's smug face practically daring me to get angry, Mom and Dad brushing it off like it was nothing more than a spilled drink at dinner. And that guilt would shrivel back into nothing. The voicemails kept coming, growing nastier with each week. At first, it was begging. "Please, honey, we need your help. Just for a little while. We'll pay you back, we swear." Then it turned into accusations. "After everything we've done for you, how could you be so selfish?" Finally, it curdled into threats, empty and pathetic. "Fine, if you want to watch your own parents end up homeless, that's on you." I didn't answer a single one. I kept living. I kept breathing. And the world, shockingly, kept turning without their drama anchoring me to the floor. Then, one night, everything came to a head in a way I almost could not believe even as it was happening. I had just gotten home from a quiet dinner date with a guy named Matthew, nice guy, a little too into his fantasy football league, but he made me laugh and paid for dinner without flinching, which was a refreshing change. I pulled into my driveway, headlights sweeping over the front of my house, and there they were, all three of them. Mom, Dad, and Tyler, standing on my porch like a sad little brigade, each clutching duffel bags that sagged with the weight of desperation. Dad looked smaller somehow, like someone had let the air out of him. Mom's makeup was smudged, mascara clinging in dark streaks under her eyes. Tyler had his hands shoved deep into his pockets, the cocky grin wiped clean off his face, replaced with something hollow and lost. They had come to me, the daughter they had always assumed would forgive and forget, the daughter who had once poured $2,000 a week into their crumbling castle without asking for anything in return. They had come to me, and by the looks of it, they had nowhere else left to go. I sat there in the car for a long minute, engine idling, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Part of me felt a bitter thrill at seeing them like that, stripped bare, needing me for once instead of the other way around. Another part, the part that still ached no matter how hard I tried to kill it, felt a flicker of something dangerously close to pity. I killed the engine, grabbed my purse, and stepped out into the night air, which was sharp and cool against my skin. Mom took a shaky step forward, her voice catching as she said, "Honey, we just need a place to stay. Just for a little while." Dad looked down at his shoes, shoulders hunched. Tyler just stared at me, hollow-eyed and silent. The bags at their feet told the whole story better than any of their words could. I looked at them, my own parents, my own brother, broken and desperate on my front porch, and I felt the storm inside me go quiet and still. I said nothing. Not yet. Not until I was good and ready to decide which way the scales were going to tip. There is a kind of silence that falls over a moment so thick and heavy that it feels almost alive, breathing against your skin, curling in the spaces between your bones, and as I stood there on the porch staring at my family, I could feel that silence settling in for a long, uncomfortable stay. Mom's hand fluttered up toward me in a pitiful little wave, her lips twitching into a smile that collapsed almost immediately into a tremble, and Dad cleared his throat like he was preparing to deliver some grand speech, but no words came out. Behind them, slouched in the back seat of their battered sedan with his hat pulled low over his eyes, Tyler sprawled like he was settling in for a weekend at a 5-star resort, not even bothering to pretend he felt any shame. I could feel the weight of the keys in my pocket, the familiar jingle brushing against my hip with every slow breath I took, and for one wild second, I considered reaching for them, unlocking the door, letting them in like old times. Throwing down a few extra blankets, heating up leftovers, pretending that forgiveness was easy and history did not leave bruises that never quite faded. That was the version of me they expected, the version they had always counted on, the dutiful daughter who patched up every broken thing and swallowed every ugly feeling until it curdled into a quiet, festering resentment deep enough to drown in. Instead, I stood there, unmoving, letting the silence stretch longer and longer until it became almost unbearable. Mom stepped forward again, bag sagging from her shoulder, her voice breaking as she said, "Honey, just for a little while, we swear. Just until we can figure things out." Her fingers clutched the strap of her bag like she was clinging to the last rope before the fall, and I noticed for the first time how tired she looked, how the lines around her mouth had deepened, how the defiance she always wore like armor had cracked at the seams. For a flicker of a second, guilt tried to slip its cold hand into my chest, but I batted it away with a mental backhand so hard I could almost hear it yelp. Behind her, Dad shifted from foot to foot, looking anywhere but at me, his face sagging under the weight of what he could no longer deny. The years of assuming I would always clean up their messes had finally caught up with them, and they had no backup plan this time. Still lounging in the back seat, Tyler pulled out his phone and started scrolling, utterly disinterested in the unfolding disaster in front of him, as if this were just another minor inconvenience someone else would fix. He caught my eye for a split second and gave me this lazy shrug, like he was saying, "Come on, you know how this goes. Just let us in, let it go like you always do." I thought about every time they had dismissed my anger, every time they told me to be the bigger person, every time Tyler's screw-ups had been painted as charming quirks while my hard work had been treated like some boring obligation. I thought about the $2,000 a week bleeding from my account while they bought new living room sets and Tyler partied through his 20s like a king without a crown. I thought about my wrecked SUV, the smirk on his face, the way Mom and Dad had nodded along as he laughed about it like it was some hilarious joke at my expense. Something inside me, something old and brittle and long abused, finally snapped cleanly in half. I took a slow step toward the door, watching their faces light up in pitiful hope, and for a moment I let them believe it was all going to be fine, that I was about to do what they expected, play my assigned role one last time. I could almost hear Mom's breath hitch in her throat, see the way Dad straightened his back a little, like he was preparing to collapse gratefully into the warmth of my house without ever having to say a single word about what brought them to my doorstep. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I lifted my hand slowly, savoring the weight of the moment, the heavy inevitability of what was about to happen, and I pressed my palm flat against the door. For one heartbeat, one long suspended breath, I looked at them, really looked, and I saw them for what they were, not family, not anymore, but three strangers who had mistaken my kindness for weakness one too many times. Without a word, without a single flicker of hesitation, I pushed the door shut in their faces. The sound of it closing echoed down the porch steps and out into the night like a final, definitive answer, and I leaned my forehead against the cool wood for just a second, letting the wave of finality wash over me. Outside, I could hear Mom's muffled sob, Dad's low, desperate curse, Tyler's disgusted snort, but I stayed where I was, breathing slowly, deeply, grounding myself in the new reality I had just chosen. I had given them every chance. I had bent over backwards, swallowed my pride, killed off little pieces of myself year after year just to make things easier for them. No more. No damn more. On the other side of the door, my family scrambled to decide what to do next, their voices rising and falling in frantic, angry bursts, but it wasn't my problem anymore. They had made their choices. And finally, blessedly, I had made mine too. For a long time after I shut that door, I just stood there with my forehead pressed against the wood, breathing in the cold, clean scent of the night air that still lingered on the frame, feeling the silence settle deep into my chest like a final stone dropped into a deep, still lake. There was no anger, no guilt, no twisting in my gut like I had always expected would come if I ever dared to choose myself over them. There was just a wide, clear emptiness, like a field after the harvest, stripped bare and waiting for something new to grow. It was not the fiery, vengeful satisfaction I thought it might be either. It was quieter, simpler, more complete in its own brutal way. I slid down to the floor, back pressed against the door, legs stretched out like a broken puppet, and I sat there for what must have been an hour or more, listening to the occasional shuffle of footsteps on the porch, the hushed, frantic whisper of voices arguing, the distant start and stop of the car engine as they seemed to debate whether to stay or go. Eventually, the sounds faded, swallowed up by the night, and the world outside went still again. Inside the house, the quiet wrapped around me like a heavy, warm blanket, so different from the clattering chaos they used to drag in with them every time they crossed my threshold. I walked through the rooms, one by one, touching the furniture, the worn patches of carpet, the chipped edge of the kitchen table, feeling the house breathe with me, empty but alive. It was mine now, fully, finally mine, not a shelter for people who took without giving, not a lifeboat for those who never learned to swim. I poured myself a glass of wine, the cheap kind that came in a box, but tasted like victory tonight, and sank into the worn armchair by the front window. I watched the empty street, the soft glow of porch lights down the block, the sway of trees in the gentle breeze, and I thought about what it really meant to be free. At some point in the small hours of the night, as the wine worked its way through my bloodstream and the deep ache of exhaustion settled into my bones, the doubts started to creep in like smoke under a locked door. I wondered if maybe I had gone too far, if maybe shutting the door in their faces had been too cruel, too final, too much like revenge, and not enough like justice. I thought about Mom's trembling smile, Dad's bowed head, Tyler's empty, defeated stare, and some old part of me, the part that had been trained from childhood to fix, to smooth, to forgive, whispered that maybe, just maybe, I could still make it right. I could pick up the phone. I could send a text. I could open the door now and invite them back, lay down the old bones of anger and pride and family loyalty and pretend, just for a little while longer, that love was enough to fix the rot that had been eating away at us for years. After all, it would be easy. It was always easy to give in when it was family, when you were taught that needing someone was the same as deserving their forgiveness. But as I sat there, watching the empty street, feeling the cold seep into the corners of the house, I realized that if I opened that door, if I made that call, if I gave even an inch, I would be right back where I started, drowning under the weight of people who never learned how to carry their own failures. They had made their bed with their careless words, their thoughtless actions, their smug certainty that I would always be there no matter what. And I was not angry anymore. I was not hurt. I was just done. Somewhere deep inside, I knew that they might never recover financially, that the foreclosure would go through, that the next time I saw them it might be on some grimy street corner or tucked into a cramped motel room with flickering lights and peeling paint. I knew that Tyler, who had always counted on someone else to clean up his messes, would stumble harder than anyone, maybe never really find his footing without someone propping him up. I knew that if I wanted to, if I really pushed myself, I could probably still save them, could make a few calls, write a few checks, fix it all one more time. But I also knew that every time I saved them, I lost a little more of myself. And this time, I chose me. The hours slipped by, slow and heavy, and just as the first bruised light of dawn started to creep over the horizon, I saw a flash of movement at the end of the street. Their car, sagging under the weight of bags and broken pride, rolled slowly past my house, headlights dim, windows fogged up from the cold night air. They did not stop. They did not even slow down. They just kept driving, fading into the gray morning mist like ghosts finally giving up the haunting. I stayed by the window long after they disappeared, watching the empty road, listening to the house breathe around me, feeling the weight of silence settle deep into the foundation. Some things once totaled can never be repaired.